Hello, I am the Deer Runner, and this analysis video I'll be continuing my chronological look at My Hero Academia for anything relevant to Deku's original information gathering quirk, which superpowers in the world are called quirks. According to my research, Deku's original quirk is a powerful scanning living quirk that attempts to fulfill Deku's desires by mentally and physically manipulating Deku to make him do exactly what it determines he should do according to what it scans for. But due to it is only alive through a small section of Deku's brain he isn't using, it has a lot of issues. This will contain spoilers for the My Hero Academia series. This is your final spoiler warning. This time period covers the final stage of several large secret operations, which unfortunately the bulk of evidence of what is truly going on is located earlier in the story during the long time the hidden forces were setting the plans up. And since this is the final stage of an event that will define the rest of the story, there will be a massive amount of references to why this occurred, but due to the main amount of evidence is not located here, then you either have to know what to look for in advance, or you probably won't catch those hidden factors. Therefore, I am going to give a quick summary of what is truly going on, and when a hidden factor comes up, also review the evidence. To start with, the secret government-sanctioned operation. At this time, the world governments were desperate, with the godlike villain All For One revealing he is still alive, and the only power that can oppose him, one for all, is weakening over time, becoming ineffective. During the transfer of it to the new wielder, Deku, the world governments faced a situation: if they don't win now, they lose. That is why the UA High summer training camp happened, sending out one of the prime targets of the villains, Class 1A, out there in an exhausted, spread out, isolated from reinforcements state, which, after the villains attacked, within 24 hours, they followed the retreating villains back to All For One, getting him. Therefore, this was a baited trap, which, with the principal of UA High, Nezu, and the teacher Almight knowing All For One is leading those villains, so knew the remembrance of the greatest criminal organization would track Class 1A down, they clearly used their own students as bait to save the world, while also secretly protecting them due to none of them died, which should be expected as they are people with heroic backgrounds. Next, the mutiny within the villain group. The villains within All For One's organization were also desperate as well, wanting to take down Shigaraki. Due to All For One told everyone Shigaraki would inherit his godlike powers and take over his entire criminal organization, which Shigaraki was the definition of instability and incompetence. So they'd be looking for a way to kill him without All For One realizing it. Since the governments were so desperate, they were able to be approached to have the heroes take the credit. Those villains wanted to either have the heroes catch Shigaraki, or have Shigaraki's ability to lead them destroyed, by having top-tier villains from top-tier criminal organizations lose against spread-out, exhausted in-training heroes, while Shigaraki led them. Therefore, reputation would be unrecoverable even if Shigaraki escapes the heroes, due to all his other operations by the public view ended with massive losses as well. So no one could be convinced to follow him, which All For One would then be forced to cast Shigaraki aside. So far we only caught Dabi spearheading that operation, but we will find more. And lastly, the revolutionary operation within the hero side. Due to society was facing utter defeat, despite the high level of suppression of the news and the population, as shown by they were able to reduce the godlike threat of All For One and the greatest criminal organization to be viewed as a mere urban legend, which was all done to prevent the normal angle levels of the human population from forming mobs that with superpowers would be unstoppable. But such extreme efforts leading to what looks to be a complete loss, with the godlike villain All For One reappearing while they were about to lose the only weapon that can beat him, The allies were turned into revolutionaries, not wanting to give them another chance, which spawned the UA Traitor Ragdoll, which the revolutionaries focused on destroying the godlike powers that were keeping the previous ones in power. By setting up the current wielder of One for All, Deku, to die by the hands of a villain he can't beat, and to track down All for One by handing him the hero who secretly was a revolutionary, Ragdoll, which has an incredible power he obviously steals, taking her power into himself, which secretly it was a purely mentally toxic Quirk, so they can take All for One's mind down before taking him down, then overthrow their enemies that can't hold them back anymore. But by how things played out, pretty much none of these plans went the way anyone wanted it to. With all the backstabbing coming from everywhere, this should not come as a surprise. Last two of my videos fully cover the setup of these events. If you want more, please review those videos, with episode 10 covers a secret government operation with also the villain side mutiny, and episode 11 covers a secret revolutionary operation. Now I will have the rest of the video continue as normal, going from start to finish of this period of time, starting with the first event, after the summer training camp attack. This would be the staff meeting of UA High. Since the operation I talked about before is not over, as they haven't got to All for One yet, they still needed to maintain the facade, so that the villains wouldn't realize the heroes are on the way. So the two people mentioned before that had to know what is truly going on, the Principal Nezu and Almight, would be required to keep the true nature of the summer training camp a secret from the people without a need to know. Which basically the entire rest of the staff at the meeting didn't at all touch the operation. So had no reason to be told, therefore we see the Principal Nezu and Almight lie to them. For a while everything else went as expected, discussing the intel they got on the villains that was allowed to be disclosed, and the public backlash implications. Then there was a disruption by President Mike. He stated someone had to have leaked the location of the summer training camp to the villains, and he blames it on an inside job within UA, among either the teachers or students. Since this person did not in any way directly touch the summer training camp secret operation, he clearly was not someone with a need to know, so didn't know that was done on purpose by the hero side. And then the one who actually is responsible for the leak of information, the Principal Nezu, gave a very sly response. He stated he can't disprove he didn't do it, which is true, because he was one of the ones who did it. Then he also states he trusts everyone else at the table due to he knew they weren't the ones that did it, besides Almight, who is his trusted accomplice. Therefore, the principal trusts everyone at the table.
At the very least, I trust everyone sitting at this table, though there's also no way for me to prove to all of you that I am innocent.
Then the meeting was soon interrupted. It does look like the principal was going to talk about the dorm system he wanted to implement. Well, later on, the Principal Nezu would believe there was a traitor in UA, which, in response, within a few days, he wanted to implement dormitories for the students to monitor them for the traitor. But of course, the real reason he thinks there is a traitor, he didn't make it public, allowing everyone else to think it's to find the one who leaked the summer training camp location. Last video stated the reason, so I'll summarize the information to make it clear why the Principal Nezu is trying to monitor students to expose a traitor. Due to the summer training camp highly manipulated state, to avoid the spread out exhausted heroes from getting slaughtered would require a powerful scanning Quirk, which Ragdoll, who is ranked 34 out of the millions of other heroes without utilizing any hero gear, would be the only one that was there that could have done it, and had a leadership position to do so, with being an outside of school training specialist that was brought in to officially be on site with a non-suspicious looking reason. Which Ragdoll with a powerful scanning Quirk would of course have been given the leadership role of the operation, to get All for One. Since Ragdoll was trusted with the operation to take down All for One, so given the most classified information, and might as well have been told everything else due to she can scan for it, her capture by the villains was a beyond disastrous outcome, which with such a quick early move capturing her and the one she was working with to prepare for the attack, Pixie Bob, which we can prove that Pixie Bob was her accomplice because she was given the leadership role for the training event that was secretly a trap for the villains. She did everything, announcing it, running pretty much everything we can see, so the accomplice of Ragdoll had to be the one in the leadership position able to insert that manipulation. Which when Pixie Bob was taken out almost immediately by the villains had removed Ragdoll's distress signal ability to be heard, which Ragdoll was then isolated, then eventually taken down. This had to be an inside job due to this person outcompeted Ragdoll. Ragdoll's ability to scan would make it impossible for an outside threat to catch her off guard, as she clearly see anything coming at her. Only someone Ragdoll would turn her back to could have done it. Which they assume Ragdoll was sent to All For One to extract the intel, a beyond catastrophic outcome that could lead to the biggest leak of classified information in world history, making it so the world governments will never stop until they find the traitor, which our prime suspects would be every one of the students due to the teachers have clear, long, trustworthy backgrounds, and the outside agents would of course be trusted due to they were trusted to take down All For One. Therefore the students would be the only suspects. The principal Nezu, even if he disagreed, would be forced to track down a traitor from among the students, therefore place the students under surveillance, by having them live where they'd be always observed, which was their dorms. But they didn't realize at the time that it was in fact due to a revolutionary operation led by the UA Traitor Ragdoll, who was aiming to give a mentally toxic Quirk directly to All For One, to take him down, which was the reason why Pixie Bob and Ragdoll were taken down. They may eventually find a traitor from the dorm system due to how revolutionary ideology becomes popular in the future, but they won't find the UA Traitor from those efforts. The next part is a phone call that interrupted the meeting. This is when a cover story is given to Almight revealing they found the League of Villains, but at the same time hiding the methods. Which of course Almight didn't question them as he knows they have to protect their sources. We can easily tear apart the excuse given as well. They claim they tracked down a person that looks like Dobby, who was one of the new recruits, heading into a building which ended up being the League of Villains' main secret hideout, before he was identified as the League of Villains member. But there are many problems with this. First, the report showed an uninjured person was scared by the normally calm Dobby, who was a burn victim, making him look creepy. The police officer taking the report should have seen how offensive that civilian harassing a burn victim was. So even so that report was required to be made, that report should have been forgotten gathering dust. Which somehow the police officer Shikuuchi, who was fully trusted by society's secret operations, pieced it together. While the police officer who took the report looked extremely uneasy, showing he knows there was no way that report would have been taken seriously. While both pro-heroes in the room were not at all happy the police tracked down a kidnapped student and a League of Villains, due to they knew what they were experiencing is an act to cover up the actual way the information was gathered. It is clear they would have to hide their double agents' identities, but the reason Dobby was brought up in the cover story was due to he was someone inside that could orchestrate a believable lie to explain how the heroes got to them. Also, he was a bit more or less trusted, so more expendable compared to the other double agent that was sent within the League of Villains. Pretty sure by what I've seen that less trust of him was well warranted. Next event in chronological order was when Deku woke up with Class 1A visiting him. During this, the conversation, Deku stated his body couldn't move, with Bakugo needing help in front of him.
My body wouldn't move. I couldn't save someone who was right in front of me.
This was covered in episode 10 of my series. To summarize it, Deku's original quirk has the ability to, through pain reduction and physical manipulation, have Deku's body, if damaged, move in the most optimal way it can. Which was the only reason Deku was moving at all at that point in time. But at the time period they're discussing, Deku's original quirk figured the severely injured Deku would just be a liability to his allies. So it turned off the physical manipulation pain reduction to have Deku crumple to the ground to stay out of his allies' ways. But when the allies screwed up, it didn't have enough time to reactivate physical manipulation and pain reduction before Bakugo was taken. Going back to the hospital scene, Kirishima eventually starts revealing they have a way to get to Bakugo by having Yaoyorozu, who put a tracking device on a Nomu that would be sent to a villain facility, make a second transceiver. Now due to it's clear Deku was desiring to rescue Bakugo at this point, Deku's original quirk would take any opportunity to do so, but just before that statement from Kirishima, it had no options. Deku didn't consciously know the exact location of any of the villain bases, and even if Deku's original quirk scanned the conversation on a tracking device, exposing the villain location, it would not act on that information due to it never gives data to Deku he can't know to continue its normal behavior of actively hiding itself. But once Kirishima and Todoroki both told Deku of the opportunity, Deku's original quirk would force Deku to go for it. Next is a flashback revealing how Kirishima and Todoroki overheard Yaoyorozu talking to Almight and Tsukauchi about the tracking device on the Nomu. Since in the last video it is revealed this tracking device was a huge mistake, as the early hero arrival stopped the assassin Ragdoll plan to deal with All for One. A dark music started playing when Yaoyorozu stated how she is frustrated this is all she can do to help.
With a classmate still in danger, it's frustrating that I can't help you more than this. I hate it.
Every time Yaoyorozu mentions this, we can expect there will be a lot of symbolism stating how badly she messed up. Moving back to the hospital scene during this conversation, we do detect another sign of Froppy working for society as a secret agent. Due to the fact, despite everyone else's response seemed natural for a teenager, Froppy's was a clear textbook definition, which as a secret agent working within the superhero high school for multiple months, she'd be strongly trained on how to properly conduct herself while acting as an ordinary student to avoid legal troubles.
It doesn't matter how noble your intentions. If you go out there trying to find the bad guys, knowing you're breaking the rules, then you're acting like villains, not heroes.
Which I know my professional training changed my grammar and ways I speak about matters that reflect my training, to a significant extent which would explain Froppy's textbook definition response. The next part, Class 1A leaves the room, allowing a doctor to speak with Deku to explain the severe damage he had received from a new power, the 1,000,000% Detroit Smash. This was covered in the last video, so for a quick summary, the doctor was correct. The doctor stated the human body has inhibitors preventing 100% use of our powers, as that power would damage our bodies, but the situation Deku was in, severe emotional and physical strain, can have turned off those inhibitors. Which with being off, the 1,000,000% attack was able to be used, which permanently damaged Deku's arms and defeated Muscular. Due to Deku's original quirk's sociopathic pursuit of its plans, it would have, if able to, use it over and over again, basically sacrificing Deku. But since it didn't, it had to have been prevented by something, which has been having no trouble using the other powers Deku was using. Which the doctor's theory would solve this, as he stated this was a subconscious action, which since Deku and his quirk doesn't have access to their own subconscious, due to they are primarily living through the conscious parts of the brain, this theory from the doctor would explain what was seen. Next is the montage of the secret government operation recruiting pro-heroes for the upcoming attack on All for One. Which, it should be obvious, secret government operations would be able to bring in public non-secret agent heroes at any point in time to deal with major threats immediately, or to build up forces for a future assault. So they use those existing connections to bring them in. Next part, the rogue and training students gathering at the meeting place for the plan to rescue Bakugo. We can see that Deku had followed out Yaoyorozu from the hospital to the group. Since Deku's original quirk would do whatever it takes to complete a plan, as long as it doesn't get its existence exposed, it would be expected to target Yaoyorozu, the only one that can make the transceiver that can track the tracking device, so the only single point of failure. It probably had many plans for Yaoyorozu, balanced between pushing her to do it and not getting itself exposed. But the end result would have a high chance of Deku being close to Yaoyorozu, encouraging her to move forward with the plan, escorting her all the way to the gathering group of Rogue and Training Heroes, explaining why Deku and Yaorezo arrived at the same time. It is unclear if Yaorezo decided on her own without manipulation from Deku, as that time period was skipped over in the anime. Once a meeting started, it turned into an intense debate, as expected, but the group did agree to do it, with a clear stated rule that they will avoid all forms of combat, doing the mission in a stealthful way. With how blatant Deku was in his agreement, clearly Deku's original Quirk adjusted his plan to fit the new desire, so Deku's original Quirk plan from now on will be focused on avoiding combat as they pursue their objectives during this period of time. At the end of this debate, there is a very important future narration, which according to my future Deku narration theory, it states this story is a retelling events by future Deku, which often future Deku directly speaks about the true form of the events during the anime. Future Deku states that in the Hosu and USJ attacks, they thought they saw true evil, but didn't mention the summer training camp attack.
After the USJ and Hosu attacks, we thought we'd seen true evil, that the worst was over.
Which is in all three situations the same group was attacking them, therefore should be considered true evil in all three, unless the villains drastically change around the time of the summer training camp attack. Since it is now stating the villains are true evil, something truly horrible must have happened. In the last video, it is shown Ragdoll orchestrated her own capture to get her mentally toxic Quirk stolen by All For One, having it put into his mind causing severe mental damage. Which one of the things it did was make him brutally beat around society, instead of before when he showed restraint trying to take over society while it remained intact. So now closer to true evil than they ever were before, due to the events that happened in the summer training camp attack, which explains that future narration. The next future narration then completed this statement, saying, but something far worse was about to begin.
But something far worse was about to begin.
Which is true, as after the end of this battle, no one tried to bail on the plans. The governments, probably due to greed, kept All For One alive, while Ragdoll kept her mouth shut about what she did to All For One, leaving a monster that may eventually escape and look for ways to cause destruction, which with god-level powers, that destruction can be absolute. Which clearly would match the something far worse about to begin, with now a godlike monster that never was there before is going to eventually attack. Next part, the group of rogue heroes are heading to Camino Ward on a train. The conversation mostly went as expected, with discussing about how they still have time to turn back, but deciding not to. But during this, a statement made by Kirishima was very noteworthy. Kirishima, who said even Uraraka ganged up on us.
Even Uraraka ganged up on us and tried to get us to change our minds.
Due to the fact Uraraka is a new secret agent working for the heroes, and taking into account Froppy's responsibilities stated before to deter Class 1A from going rogue as she performs her secret agent duties. We would expect the one Froppy is responsible for, the new secret agent, Uraraka, would be told to strongly support Froppy's responsibilities, explaining why Kirishima used words such as ganged up, indicating they expected to be their strong pushback from Uraraka that would otherwise conflict with her happy and not pushing people around nature. Next part, the group of rogue and training heroes arrived in Camino Ward. They predictably bought disguises that were pretty good, and practiced their different fake personalities, which would be required due to the villains know what they look like. After the rogue heroes got their disguises, they then witnessed the next stage of the heroes' plan. Having UA look defeated, apologizing to the world for the loss of Bakugo, stating it was due to negligence, which was designed to have the villains think they won with such a display, not realizing it was to put them at ease for the upcoming attack. Probably aiming to encourage them to celebrate with some of that alcohol that was next to them in that bar secret hideout. Also, it is clear that even so UA staff would temporarily make themselves look bad, it will be revealed it was an act, and UA did defend themselves quite well after they stated the required damaging statements, which will put them in a decent position in the immediate future. The future narration attached to right after this directly does talk about this interpretation, stating the public backlash was growing against Hero Society and they needed to do something soon.
People were turning against heroes, and if we didn't do something, it was just going to get worse.
Which this event will in large part reverse a lot of the damage for now, but the future will still have issues. Next event I will be covering the 2 points of view of the same time period. One from the official hero's perspective, and the other from the rogue hero's perspective. This is due to the story will be jumping between both, as well as looking at events out of order, so I need to separate them or this would be a jumbled mess. I'll start with one that is simpler and shorter, the official hero operation. It starts with them discussing their upcoming attack on the League of Villains, which Almight did state in private to Gran Torino he believes All For One leads the League of Villains.
And with such staggering stakes at hand, we can be sure that he is involved.
All for one.
Which proves Almight knew Class 1A would be attacked in the summer training camp, because of the mentioned before remnants of the greatest criminal organization All For One had access to. Looking back at the villains that unknown to them was surrounded, the villains' guard fell down swiftly after UA made the false they were negligent statements on the news. They didn't choose to celebrate with alcohol, which would have been the best outcome for the heroes, but instead the villain leader Shigaraki confidently opened the shackles on Bakugo, thinking it would may be enough for him to join them. Which, with the heroes directly monitoring them, they saw the amazing opportunity, having Bakugo now able to help with his own rescue, which it quickly became apparent that was a small window of opportunity, with Bakugo immediately going on the offensive. So the hero side commenced adjusting their forces from standby to going on the attack. Which within that time, Bakugo remained unrestrained. The heroes also commenced their coordinated attack on the other facility around the same time, as well to prevent the villains from using their known teleportation ability to send resources over, which were found to be the extremely powerful Nomus hidden in the other facility. Prior to the heroes attacking directly, there was one more potential hidden event. We do get a single look at All For One's face, which he is smiling. Though, even so it may be because he is seeing his chosen inheritor, Shigaraki, far more mature behavior. Ragdoll's mentally damaging quirk had already infected him, which would make him smile a lot, and since we will see All For One's smile is very persistent in the future, this probably is a surface symptom of the infection. Ragdoll's living quirk also at that point would have already noticed the heroes approaching, so also had to have moved to save Ragdoll from the building being demolished through controlling All For One around that time, so with it being more active, we can expect its side effects would be more pronounced, explaining the smile. Now for the hero attack. They quickly barged in, which when the double agents saw this, they, to protect their secret identities, attempted to assist the villains, because they want to this time have the double agents be some of the people All For One would turn to if he escapes again, allowing society to quickly launch another attempt instead of allowing him to live in the shadows, then catching society off guard again, that had almost doomed them the first time that happened. But the heroes needed to also treat their double agents like villains, so Gran Torino targeted Dabi, knocking him out. Though at this point there was strong indications they shouldn't have worked with Dabi, it is clear Gran Torino would not know of the warning signs. But instead know Dabi is far too powerful, so he needed to prevent the double agent from suspiciously holding back. Knocking Dabi out immediately have solved that issue. Which if Dabi does regain consciousness during the battle, he will continue to act unconscious, to not lose his reputation with the heroes. We can also catch Kurogiri the warp villain working with Dabi to take down Shigaraki as well. By the simple observation, Almight was right in front of them, So this situation of course needed a quick response. There was no time to wait to be told what to do. Kurogiri holding back, waiting till Shigaraki completes a full sentence, would guarantee the heroes would beat them up in time, which Kurogiri did on both times, which had the Kurogiri predictably fail both times.
Kurogiri! Gate! Preemptive binding! Kurogiri! Warp over as many as you can!
The Nomu, right?
Kurogiri!
2 videos ago, I did find Dabi most likely is looking for the disgruntled all-for-one villains that want to take out Shigaraki. Which, during that episode, the warp villain let slip that Dabi was special by calling his name out when telling the entire group of, supposedly, equally new recruits to leave the battlefield through the warp gates.
It's been 5 minutes since the signal. Let's go, Dabi.
So both strongly knew each other, but unlike Dabi, who only for a short time interacted with Shigaraki, which caused him to be disgusted with Shigaraki, Kurogiri had to constantly, at all times, be around that mad, childlike villain, and you can easily see how much that bothered him. We also can see at the summer training camp attack when the in-training heroes thought they rescued the captured students. Therefore, all the villains did except the one who set up the deception, which was Mr. Compress. Kurogiri appeared and pressured everyone to leave, not wanting to try to secure the objective, which by what he knew at the time, would have obviously doomed Shigaraki. Losing top-tier villains from top-tier villain organizations against spread-out exhausted heroes, while failing every objective. All this motive and clear actions that could have jeopardized Shigaraki's prospects on life does make it clear at least Dabi and Kurogiri were trying to defeat Shigaraki, but there were probably more working with them. Which I do want to point out, I do not see any evidence the heroes knew the warp villain was assisting them at this point in time. Though technically Dabi being his ally could have negotiated an orchestrated accident allowing him out of jail, with the warp villain able to use his power, I doubt Kurogiri would risk having All for One figure that out. So would have instead have his own ace in the hole, due to Kurogiri knew his plan would lead to his own capture, so had time to plan his escape in advance, which all he needed was a few seconds opening to use his teleportation power, so this should have been easy for him, allowing him to come back to All for One's side without suspicion. Now we are going to look at these events from the rogue hero's perspective. As a group of rogue heroes got close enough for the building they are targeting to get in scanning range, Deku's original Quirk could see Bakugo was not there. Also, since Deku's original Quirk can't scan One for All properly to understand the powers it has, it probably couldn't tell what the related All for One Quirk could do to a large extent either, except the person that has it is a powerful entity and must be avoided at all costs. So no chance it could have picked up on the fact Bakugo would be teleported there. With this, Deku's original Quirk would abandon the save Bakugo plan, and instead focus on the other desires to keep the group safe and, unfortunately, a dangerous redundant plan as well. Due to the get to the building the tracking device was in, Desire had activated Deku's original Quirk, as such a desire was basically hand in hand with attempting to save Bakugo, and often brought up, so would be a clear desire Deku has. This would activate a plan to get them to the building and then leave the building, regardless that the plan to save Bakugo was cancelled. As I said before, Deku's original Quirk has a lot of issues, but at the same time, the other plan to avoid combat would be active, so it would actively avoid having the malfunction kill them. Looking at how Deku's original Quirk handled that problem, Deku's original Quirk would clearly see the villains would have noticed the group of rogue heroes getting too close to any point of interest, which as a plan of hiding the operation in plain sight allowed civilians to walk right up to the base. If there was a person that decided to break in or look through that window in the alley, you could see the gnomes from, which the group of rogue heroes did. Then those civilians were going to be taken out quickly. Therefore, once the rogue hero Kirishima peeked through the window, able to see the Nomus, the villains were charging at them. But since the official hero operation quickly arrived, demolishing the building, this destroyed the villains that were coming at them. And the section they were in was of an extremely durable section that Deku's original quote could easily scan for the fact they'd be safe there when the building's demolished by the heroes. And that it will provide a hidden safe area to look for an escape route. So clearly Deku's original quirk did one of its most common actions. It timed their arrival for the best result for the plans, having them get to the building without facing villains, and now they can safely look for an escape route from that secure hidden makeshift bunker. With this game plan known, the group of young heroes made their way to the track advice location, and was now able to see the building, which Deku's original quirk probably was delaying them a lot during their approach, to time their arrival with the upcoming hero attack. They decided to act normal across the street using a vending machine, which two drunk-looking people started to harass them, though they were probably secret agents. Looking for the heroes, attempting to make the kids so uncomfortable, they leave. But after that group of teenagers rocked right at the villain base, the heroes probably figured they were secret villains. Due to the building they were heading to was about to be demolished, probably killing them, the heroes figured they should just let it happen. Due to this was no time to show mercy. At this point in the story, it all went according to plan. The heroes demolished the building, and the in-training heroes started observing what was happening to look for a safe escape route. Due to the fact of sheer power of a potential counter-strike for the villains could destroy the entire section of the city, Deku's original quirk decided to keep them there hidden in a makeshift bunker, to avoid being detained in the open during the potential city-destroying counter-strike. Deku's original quirk took advantage of all delays, but when the rest decided to leave, Deku's original quirk had Deku turn back with the excuse he heard a sound. But it was just mental manipulation to buy the last minute needed to allow the villains' counterattack to happen while they still were safe and hidden. With such walking over rubble sound All For One was making, should have easily been swallowed up by the sheer amount of sound from everyone else moving around. So for Deku to notice that sound out of everything else would have had to have been his original quirk using mental manipulation. During all this, unknown to anyone else, All For One's mind was severely damaged by Ragdoll's mentally toxic quirk, making him extremely dangerous with god-level powers at boot. So All For One went way too far counter-striking, blasting the heroes away along with an entire section of the city of Camino Ward, killing an unimaginable amount of civilians. Which, since he soon will make it clear himself, All For One is a true leader of the League of Villains. Such a monstrous act would destroy the lie that he built up Shigaraki around, with claiming Stain worked with Shigaraki. Due to Stain ideology would never condone such a massacre of civilians in the pursuit of reforming hero society, which Stain wanted to have heroes truly conduct themselves like heroes. Also, it clearly didn't help Shigaraki slipping up over and over again, even stating he hates Almight, which Stain considers Almight the only hero worthy enough to defeat Stain himself.
Justice, peace. You created a garbage society by lifting up such ridiculous ideals. That's why I targeted you, Almight.
Shigaraki!
This is your fault! I hate you!
But this brings a major point. We can see despite All For One destroyed the lie about Stain works with Shigaraki, since we have plenty of non-double agent villains still loyal to Shigaraki, we can't assume this must be some form of mind control at work. Since there are plenty of mind-altering quirks out there, and there really is no other explanation for the loyalty, we clearly see that at this early point some type of mind control quirk was being used on the villains that Shigaraki leads. Which we can easily identify their motive, which was the chosen inheritor of the power of All For One behavior made it he couldn't naturally gain loyalty for the ones he leads. Which if a significant rebellion happened, by the people Shigaraki directly leads, this would not only heavily damage his reputation, but also would heavily legitimize the ideal of taking action against Shigaraki's severe misbehavior throughout All For One's organization. Which villains throughout All For One's organization would be motivated to deal with the problem. With how powerful and pissed off people are against Shigaraki from within their organization, this probably be a death sentence for Shigaraki, or force Shigaraki into exile. So with this motive, basically, this makes mind control being used would be a guaranteed action that was taken by All For One. I am now going to go through everyone Shigaraki leads to see if their behavior could make sense if we factor in mind control. We can assume the first group we saw under Shigaraki's command, the small army he led in the USJ attack, was under mind control, due to attacking a school of teenagers is an extraordinarily extreme act. But doing that to specifically piss off the symbol of peace that would arrive bringing vengeance down upon them, and try to take him down with a supposed power that can beat him, which countless tried before, so the outcome may have been a bit predictable for them. So, those logic errors while following an opposite of a charismatic leader, Shigaraki, probably required mind control. So we can conclude Shigaraki's small army in the USJ was under mind control. For Shigaraki's current group, this easily explains the non-double agent ones, ignoring the logic errors in a lie of Stain worked with Shigaraki. But now we have to figure out what about the 3 villains that are actually betraying All For One. Since one of the double agents which I haven't talked about yet in this video has had extreme level of mental control training, specifically trained to resist completely mind-controlling quirks, and acting skills to act like they are being controlled. Therefore that one can be explained as it simply did not work on them. But they probably figured out what actually happened and are just acting like they're being controlled. But Dabi and the Warp villain can't, as they did not receive that training. If we assume they were hit with mind-controlling quirks already, then we have to look closely to see what went wrong. Since we can see this mind control leaves the personality of all its victims intact to an extremely high degree, due to the intact personalities of all the victims, that means this mental control, though it is strong, it is not that stable, allowing far too many openings for malfunctions to happen. It probably wouldn't be able to handle a person thinking, to be loyal to All For One, I am going to deal with the problem the leader refused to handle, which is Shigaraki. Or another one could be our leader Shigaraki needs to be dealt with for Shigaraki's plans to succeed. So that would explain Dabi and Kurogiri. This might lead to an interesting result later on, legally allowing them to have a defense, to be released from legal consequences early if the mind control is proven. But for now, it is a well-kept secret, and it is not proven they all were under mind control, but at least most were. Looking back at the battle, during this strike with Ragdoll's quirk highly active in his mind, you can see that Ragdoll wasn't targeted with a full blast, due to she wasn't being aimed at, but instead an indirect hit that she could theoretically survive with the elastic, durable tiger who was holding Ragdoll. You can also observe that after the attack, not a single major attack was shown to go at Ragdoll, despite being so close to the epicenter of the city, devastating attack. Which to have happened, the living quirk of Ragdoll must have actively directed the attacks away, creating a sort of eye in the storm Ragdoll could be kept safe in, while everything else was ripped apart around them. Looking back at the battle, next point Best Jeanist was not down unlike all the rest of the heroes, and he tried to fight back, defending everyone, but All For One at this point struck down Best Jeanist, the number 4 hero. I am surprised he had survived, but the attack had one of his lungs get obliterated and a giant hole ripped through his torso. With that power displayed, none of the rogue heroes dared to move from where they were, allowing Deku's original quirk to scan the battlefield that is fully controlled by the villains at that point, for a change that can allow them to leave safely. It probably was looking for the first opportunity at that point in time, which it expected the hero's Counter-Strike would provide those openings. After this, Bakugo and the rest of the League of Villains was teleported to that location, which, as Deku's original Quirk, still not seeing an escape route, had stayed put, allowing plenty of time for the rescue Bakugo desire to activate a plan to save Bakugo. But with the villains in full control of the battlefield, it didn't see an opening, so waited till the expected powerful hero-side reinforcements to arrive, which would probably start giving them opportunities. After a while, Almight arrived and started battling All for One, while at the same time, the League of Villains attempted to recapture Bakugo. We can see that Double Agent Dabi, if he had regained consciousness, was acting unconscious, to not lose his double agent status with the heroes. But the other double agent, which for the ones that didn't see my episode 10, would come as an absolute surprise. The double agent Himiko Toga, with her being conscious, would of course try to make herself look loyal to the villains. A quick explanation on why such a character should at least seem highly suspicious and her entire backstory should be doubted. Late in the series, Toga's full power is to turn into anyone even replicating their clothes, and then use the powers of the ones she turns into. Combining that with having been taught extreme level of mental control, making herself resistant to quirks that can force her to tell the truth. This makes Toga probably the only person on Earth that can truly be a double agent. There was no chance at all society wasn't going to take her by force and hide her true abilities from the world to have an ace in the hole the moment her powers were understood. Toga's full powers only appeared when she was about to die, a strong sign she was hiding her true abilities. We can also look at the scene showing Toga murdered someone, but the blood actually completely conflicts with her entire cover story. Simply put, such a back injury causing that amount of blood would have soaked his white shirt, as Toga was celebrating. It not happening meant a blood-draining quirk was used. Since I already pointed out, Toga is probably hiding she can copy the ability of others. Then if that is true, then the dead body was someone who had the blood-draining powers. Since the blood-draining killer, who Toga claims to be, probably got that name and the upper hand on his superpowered victims with blood draining, it is clear we should not believe Toga is a blood draining killer, as she claims to be, due to the evidence indicates the scene is Toga killing and replacing the blood draining killer. Blood location on Toga's mouth also supports us, as it was just barely enough on it to reflect a single attack bite to drain just enough blood to use his powers against him, showing it was a determined attack instead of reflecting her claim of loving to drain the blood, so would have had a lot more if that was true. And the rest of the blood not coming out of him meant she used his powers to store his blood for later use, which since she attempted to take his place as a blood-draining killer, which being able to demonstrate his powers could be critical to a cover story, she kept it, though her crazy act was enough to convince them she's a real deal. So it wasn't needed, it was just a precaution. If you want a detailed account of the evidence against Toga, and a step-by-step breakdown of how Toga's fight with the blood-draining killer went, please refer to episode 10 of my series. Looking back at the battle, with the battlefield changed so much, with heroes pushing the villains back from the full control of the battlefield, as expected, the plan that Deku's original Quirk made was impressive. Using Todoroki to make a massive ice spike reaching to the sky, allowing the speedster Deku and Ida to use it as a ramp, with Kirishima's power breaking the protective wall of the makeshift bunker to allow them to reach the ramp at full speed, directly from the fortified hiding spot. And then have Kirishima, the friend of Bakugo, yell out to Bakugo to accept their help. which his friend, calling out to him, had Bakugo immediately fly over to use the momentum of the rogue heroes to get out of there. With at the same time, Almight would hold back All For One, but also Mount Lady and Gran Torino would hold back the League of Villains. So a complete covering of the rogue heroes' escape. This plan of Deku's original Quirk was great, which can be expected with the amount of time it had to plan. Due to his time so perfectly with Gran Torino's arrival, we can assume Deku's original Quirk saw it be better to wait for Gran Torino to arrive for extra cover. More specifically, time it so the first thing Gran Torino would do is help, instead of being spotted by the villains, to give Gran Torino the best shot to ambush the distracted villains that will focus on the escaping rogue heroes. Which is a very common action of Deku's original Quirk, holding Deku back till it is the best time to move. This would also distract the villains from Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, so they can run away while being protected by Todoroki's ice if any of the city block destroying attacks come their way. Since Deku's original Quirk left, I'm going to just quickly point out any remaining hidden information, then move on. The first one is Gran Torino's choice of who he attacks when he covered the rogue hero's escape. He took out everyone except Toga and Shigaraki, which there are strong reasons why. First, Shigaraki's devastating close-range attacks could kill Gran Torino instantly, so not a good target to hit with his close-range attacks. It would take a while before Gran Torino decided to attempt an attack, which Shigaraki literally told him to turn to dust, which could have happened, but since there was plenty of warning signs Shigaraki was escaping, Gran Torino assumed it was now or never, so that's why he attacked. And Toga is a known secret agent, working for the heroes, so best not to put her in a corner with an attack, while the rest had no reason to be kept conscious. At this point, Toga would still try to pursue a mission, not trying to run away or leave without being ordered to do so. Even when a warp gate appeared behind her, she stayed by Shigaraki's side to make sure she follows the organization she infiltrated. With Toga staying, All For One used Magna's power to have all the rest of the League of Villains fly to Toga, so they all would be flung through the warp gate that was also forcefully activated by All For One. Having Toga succeed at staying in a position All For One would, if he escapes, would eventually come to. We do hear the Principal Nezu, when watching the situation on television, does think the plans have failed. Now it's up to Almight.
Our plan has been thwarted. It's up to you now, Almight.
But since that happened well after he knew Bakugo, the missing student, was rescued, we can see that the Principal Nezu was aware of the true nature of the operation that was focused on quickly defeating All For One. After this, Ragdoll's original Quirk fully planned for All For One to go down, as it did not want the villains to win, which would have led to the villains taking over the world. So it had to make the villains' defeat convincing, having All For One fight effectively as long as All Might could handle it. Also, since the revolutionaries' goals is to destroy the god-level powers that are used to legitimize the rule of the ones in charge, it may have been a convenient option by the living Quirk to remove the remaining power of All Might from the table by dragging out the fight, which also removed the perception of the world population inability to revolt against the powerful ones that rule them, by the whole world seeing the greatest power of the ones in charge get destroyed. Looking back at the battle, we do hear All For One admit he figured out Deku is All Might's chosen inheritor of One For All.
Izuku Midoriya! He's the child you passed One For All on to, isn't he?
Now, I already picked up on the very moment All For One had to have figured out if he hadn't already. This was due to Deku's slip-up during the mall hostage situation, which Deku yelled out to Shigaraki, "What does All For One want?"
Hold on, Shigaraki! I have a question too. What is All For One after?
With that statement, since Deku displayed similar powers to All Might was directly teaching him as if he was mentoring his next chosen inheritor, or One For All, and none of the students there would have been told such information unless they were the chosen inheritor of One For All. The villains completely understood what Deku said. Shigaraki indirectly strongly responded to Deku's leak of information, telling him after a pause to process what was just said to him, then said next time he'll probably have to kill him.
The next time we meet, I'll likely have to kill you.
Not want to, he has to. Indirectly stating he now knows Deku is a priority target. Also, All For One was monitoring them to keep Shigaraki safe, so probably heard those damning statements as well. And this also was a point Uraraka was thrown into the dark secret operations of the world governments, as she heard the name All For One, which they couldn't afford for her to spread the information, leading back to the one who she heard it from, Deku. You can easily see at least someone silenced her, and she never told anyone even after the whole world witnessed that godlike villain named All For One on screen. And it also helps that Uraraka was going through some financial difficulty in the recruitment phase, with her family's barely functioning business. This also made it sure Deku would be separated from Uraraka as well, due to this wasn't the first time the questionable state of Deku's mind had leaked highly classified information. So they didn't want Deku to endanger the secret agents Uraraka would have had to be mentored by and work with, so they kept them separate. Episode 8 of my series shows in detail of Uraraka's and also Froppy's recruitment, which for Froppy, this happened during her internship, when Froppy saved a massive secret government operation to recover critical cargo at sea. Just by looking at a basic description of the event, you can see the cover-up and the recruitment happening then. With how they said it turned out to be, unknown to them, smuggled in drugs which wouldn't warrant such a massively expensive, costly response with a basically army-sized amount of resources brought in. Defined it so clearly was a cover story. Then went around praising Froppy and stating they will work with her in the future, which eventually they recruited her in secret. Looking back at the battle, at a certain point it was clear Almight needed to end the match or he'd lose. So Ragdoll's original Quirk still made it convincing by utilizing a full-powered form of All For One that probably limited his movement options as seen in the last video, with Muscle's full power form limited him as well, allowing All Might to get a realistic opportunity to land that only need to be one hit to All For One's face at full force. That'd be convincing enough so no one would know the match was thrown. We also see the sudden smile appear on All For One's face when that attack from All Might came in, showing Ragdoll's original Quirk, making sure All For One would go down. Now let's try to figure out what specifically this rogue Quirk did in All For One's mind to defeat him during that smile. We already seen that Ragdoll's Quirk chose to have All For One use a max-powered form so that he will be slowed down significantly, allowing All Might to land a hit, unlike before when All For One could have easily outlasted All Might, deflecting and dodging him consistently, so that All Might couldn't commit to a finishing attack. But when the smile appeared, we do see All For One doom himself, powering up his only arm that could have blocked All Might's attack, which had made it so All For One could not move fast enough, dooming All For One, plus probably restrained other things he could have done, which had forced the smile we saw due to the sudden rush of physical manipulation and mental manipulation. Then the battle was over. Unfortunately, the government decided to not kill All For One, probably to see if they can take this power. Big mistake, as Ragdoll broke its mind with her Quirk, making him far more dangerous, and would of course have Ragdoll play a large part in keeping All For One locked up, due to he has her scanning power, so the absolute most catastrophic person is there handling the security. It's even worse as there was a possibility the control Ragdoll had may not hold properly. In episode 11 of my series, I did uncover that Ragdoll is blood related to Deku, therefore her powers follows most of the rules from Deku's original Quirk. Therefore the rules seen from Deku's original Quirk having it try to fulfill the desires of its host. Even though it is clear this wasn't working for All For One at that point, the sheer amount of time Ragdoll's original Quirk remains in All For One, that separation may not hold, leading to a monstrous form of All For One without anyone able to control him, but he refused to put him down due to the shot at that godlike power, probably. A classic case of, was about to win, but got too greedy. So that clearly fulfilled the future narration. The worst event will begin during this event. They all misplayed their hands, leading to an inevitable, far bloodier future. Now to look at the impact of this game-changing threat from Ragdoll in regard to how the heroes or villains can win. For the heroes, it is straightforward. Identify and defeat, or it keeps hitting them, and may eventually just give up on its own. As it views that things are not working out, it might as well cut your losses. But for the villains, it is a game changer. Even if the villains manage to completely defeat the heroes, they could never reach the goals that they had wanted if Ragdoll's Quirk, that has centralized control to itself, would instead choose whatever it wanted to do. Which a Quirk being alive through a section of a brain that significantly mirrors another person's section of their partial brain would not create a sane entity. So a villain victory would be prone to lead to an insane, nonsensical result compared to what the villains actually wanted. The villains have to remove Ragdoll's Quirk from All for One to win, but even then it might be too late, due to since this Quirk creates a multi-personality in the mind of whoever has it, the brain of the victim might not be able to be recombined, leaving permanent damage, or as seen before with other powers, a shadow of what was once there, that this time won't dissipate in time before it retaliates. Which since Deku's brain when scanned showed no abnormality, this split may avoid the quick change of physical features seen at other times Quirks were removed, due to how indistinguishable it is from what is normally there, so may not be able to unravel the mental changes from what was normally there before. So if removed, may still have the controlling entity remaining, but without the scanning power. Therefore, if All for One succeeds at giving Shigaraki his power while Ragdoll's Quirk Search is still attached, that could be an immediate game over for the villains without anyone realizing it for a very long time. It is unclear if a shadow of the Quirk remaining after removal is true, and maybe they could remove it without consequences. And it is unclear what it decided to do later on, with at least the information stored here in this period of time that is being analyzed. But according to my future Deku narration theory that states this story is a retelling of events by future Deku, since we can dig it out, future Deku does know about it, but when he figured it out is unclear, and it is also unclear what he did in response, and what did it do. But by what future Deku says, this will lead to a catastrophe. After the battle concluded, Deku with his other training heroes that was still with him had heard the message from Almight that now it is your turn. Deku was one of the few people that knew what that actually meant, that Deku is now responsible for being the symbol of peace, as the Almight used up his remaining power. Future Deku narration of course agreed.
He'd used up everything, and now it was left to me.
Which despite all the issues that I have said before in this series of mine, it was true. Despite all those problems, it was now Deku's responsibility to make things right. That seems to be all the information stored here, so I'll end my video here. In the next event, the students will be approaching the licensing exam and participating within it. But during this, Toga approaches and attempts to, without Deku realizing it, try to recruit Deku into a radical secret group. By trying to make him fail the licensing exam, having his only option is to join Toga's group. Which Deku's original Quirk didn't realize it, but instead thought it should trust her, due to it knew Toga was a secret agent, allowing Toga to get to Deku. This has been the Deer Runner, the Runner of Deer. Thanks for watching.